Trigger warning, in this episode we discuss sexual assault, disassociation and racist abuse.
I was in a field, and then, the sky was really blue, and when I came I was like, oh, it's like you've taken magic mushrooms. It's just sort of glittery. I was like, this is just a great time.
Hello. So this is Sophie Duker, if you don't know. Where have you been? She is a rising star, if not an already established shooting star on the UK comedy scene. She can be seen on Frankie Boyle's New World Order, heard on BBC Sounds Obsessed with I May Destroy You, which is a strong recommend. She's everywhere, and for good reason. She's wonderful. Her comedy is insightful, so articulate, and watching her go from a newcomer to where she is now has been big times inspiring. We get into so much fantastic stuff in this episode. We had to cut masses. For everybody who is a subscriber on Patreon, that is a boon for you. I am putting up extra audio clips, including Sophie's love for nostalgic fingering, only when it's done in an ironic way. Hickeys. Also, we talk about Erica Lust's ethical porn. I go into some storylines that are equal parts absurd and deeply intimate. Fun times. Masses else as well. So get onto Patreon, www.patreon.com/Helen Duff. And for just £3 a month, you can hear all those juicy extra audio clips. Also, if you want to give us a one-off donation for this episode and any of the episodes in our full first series, woof, what an exciting thing to be able to say. This is the 11th of 11 exceptional episodes spanning so many different experiences of orgasm, so many different guests, so many wonderful women and non-binary folk who've contributed to the making of this podcast. Yeah, jump on Ko-fi for a one-off donation. That's ko-fi.com/Helen Duff. And as ever, all of the details about our guest, Sophie Duker, and how to connect with the podcast in different ways online and off are in the episode notes. I'm going to keep this intro short because we've got so much to back into the episode, which is torture for me because we've just moved into effectively Centre Parks. Our new rental is a new build. Who knew heated towel racks could have such a significant impact on your mental health? Anyway, that's enough about me. In this episode, we talk about Sophie's experiences of horrendous online trolling, how she uses therapy as an essential part of her process to make sure she's anchored in her body while all that shit is going down, masturbating, multiple orgasms, disassociation, and the distinct difference between having an open relationship and being polyamorous. Heads up for anyone who has particularly sensitive ears, Sophie is sitting by a road. As I said, it's a rich one, and I'm so pleased to have it as the final episode in this first series of Come As You Are, the podcast. We made it! Stick around in the outro for more details about the second series coming at you in a few weeks. But for now, here's Sophie. Did you feel like when you went to uni, you were saying at 18, you had a sense of I think something's about to be born here in me, like the person I want to be is going to come up? Did that materialise?
In reality, I was very insecure, as so many of us going to university are, because we are usually about 18. But I definitely found it exhilarating to be around boys at that time, and to just be oh yeah, I can use my body and do what I like. I just felt like a really big ownership over my body, and I liked the thought that I might have sex with people. I was actually to skip back a bit because I lost my virginity before I went to university, but I feel like I'm obviously going to have sex. I had sex with someone called Wright. I think his surname was Wright, which I don't think. I think that's sufficiently anonymous. But I was kind of just I didn't need it to be a super special thing. I met him at a lock and key party.
What's that?
I think in
what
Soho.
Is that? What's a lock and key party?
It's a really feminist thing where all the women who go to the party have a padlock around their necks, and the men at the party have various different keys, and they go around all night trying to
Okay.
Yeah. I mean the opposite of feminist. Sorry, I'm not. I mean the opposite of feminist. I mean
right.
The most anti-feminist party you could have. They've all got a padlock. Guys have a key. I assume there are about three possible combinations, but it gives an in to the men to be does my key unlock your padlock? And his key did not unlock my padlock. But luckily he did what I later found out were like some weird, I think it was not necessarily straightforward pickup artist techniques, but he made me do like a sort of mind exercise. He made me do like the thing where you imagine a box and a horse and a ladder, and then like told me this was like I think thought experiments were like in the internet at that time. Yeah. And so he was like, oh well, the horse is like your future lover and the box is like your relationships. So it was kind of a bit like therapy. And then I remember he like dragged his fingernails along like the skin of my arm like that, and I was like, oh, this is nice, even though he looked like a sort of like new rave nightmare. And
I was going to say Mr. Right is regardless of his patter, even if that was cringe, if there's a chemistry there, then I can understand why you went for it. I think sometimes it's quite hard to explain. Like on paper, sometimes scenarios sound nightmarish, but in the moment you're like extremely turned on because there's just something going on with your pheromones.
Yeah, I just really liked him, and I was like, yeah, I think I can have sex with this person. And that time I didn't realise it didn't work. The sex didn't work. I think like I don't know what happened, but like he didn't. I mean, the sex worked. It doesn't matter if he came or not. But I think he somehow lost his erection or something, and he apologised loads. And I was like, babes, I've never had sex. I don't know the difference. Genuinely, I was like very confused. And then we had sex again, and I was like, oh, I see.
So you went to an all-girls school. The only reason I ask is because you said there were like finally boys.
Yeah, I went to an all-girls school. Though we did know boys, but like they were out of reach, like the song "Out of Reach." They were out of reach, and they, I guess, was sort of like not a foreign concept. Like it was a girls' school in London. It was like a day school, and like we had weekends. But I think when boys aren't just up in your face all the time, you sort of like they're sort of mythologized a bit. They're sort of maybe a bit like prey or like predators, and you kind of engage with them in specific circumstances. So it feels maybe like a bigger deal.
What changed when you got to uni then, if anything?
What changed is opportunity. I think because there were like boys all around like where I lived, in like I could see them at any minute of any day. Boys on tap, buffet of boys. I think that I was able, there were like less like, oh, you will hook up with someone at a house party and then you will go home to your house. It was sort of like, I didn't have boyfriends when I was at school, so I think I really wish that I had a time where sex wasn't on the menu, but sex was always on the menu. Like it was always a possibility that you would, or I would say even like an expectation that you might have full sex with someone, which obviously isn't the case, but it was just something like, we're all grown-ups now, and I was just like, I just don't know if that's like, I was excited to do it, but I was just like, everything is like I'm on like a black slope immediately, and I think people like loads of the boys were very focused on sex as well because like they'd been out of the house for the first time. So yeah, I think it just became like the stakes had been raised a little bit, and I think that I had fun, but I didn't necessarily protect myself. I also think at uni is where I started realizing that I was queer, but like in a very germinal way.
How did that develop? Yeah.
The way that I most noticed it is because I had a crush on my best friend, who was also best friends with my boyfriend. We were all very close friends, but and I thought it was like sort of like, I think I made my like there's a sort of like weird jealousy where I felt inadequate. I thought, of course he wouldn't like me, he must like her, but that was also because I liked her. And I remember having a dream where I came back from like going home or like not being at uni, and like would walk in on them in bed together, and it was just like a really like horrible sex dream. But I think it was slightly misplaced because I think I did fancy her as well, and we had like a fairly romantic friendship, but I just didn't really know how to deal with those feelings. We also like kissed on the quad at one point, but like people, I found that at university, at least at my university, people were just getting off for like abstract reasons. But then I was like, why am I kissing my friend? Like I was sort of like straddling her, like pinning her down on the quad and sort of like kissing her next to the bar. I was like, why is this happening?
Do you think as a funny person as well, you might have gone into default oh, I'm going to do this thing that I want to do and then pretend it's a joke.
Lol, this is just
Yeah.
well, I think I knew. I think so. I think it was just like, this is just part of like the aura, like what happens, part of my personality. I think, like, apart from like flashing up when I had those like strong feelings for my friend at that time, I think that I generally, like, I knew queer people. I went to like some queer nights, but I wasn't really part of any scene. I think it just like sort of flashed out when I sort of felt a bit lost or a bit insecure. I think instead of like interrogating anything I felt, I was like, this is just a thing that happened.
Do you reckon and this is not necessarily, this is something I'm interested in, there was less rivalry encouraged between women, or less comparison, like less negative sort of patriarchal, oh, you are a competitor rather than like a sister, encouraged, then women would realise their queerness more easily. I'm bisexual, but I'm only really coming to terms with it as a consequence of being in a really loving relationship, where I now feel more comfortable sexually, more sexual, more happy in my body, that I can actually finally look past my own insecurities and sense of whatever that was, and realise that actually I would quite like to be with the feelings I feel for people of both sexes, all sexes, are could be sexual rather than just like
like have sexual and romantic potential.
Exactly, as opposed to, I think in the past I always mapped that feeling of potential attraction onto a feeling of maybe jealousy or inadequacy on my part, or like a sense of that woman is so beautiful / amazing / inspiring, I must feel lesser than, or something was going on there. I don't know. I just think I always blocked or looked past the potential that actually I just fancied them a lot.
I think that's definitely a thing. I think I used to think there was like this certain quality about female friendships that was just quite intense, and I think the phrase girl crush, or the term girl crush, is super dangerous, because I definitely had like a girl crush. I was like, oh, I have a girl crush on one of my teachers. I like just had a crush on her. This was way back in school, and I just like was so like, I just like was obsessed with her, but I wasn't allowed to think that it was romantic, or even like in the sense of like being like, say you've got a friend who is so impressive and doing all these amazing things and it's wonderful. I agree that you're like, oh, you can't, because women are meant to be competitive and competitive for male attention, and only one person can be this sort of golden girl. You can't lean into just being really buoyed by how great your friend is, because it always reflects badly on you. You're less desirable, you're less sexy. You have to think about it of like, okay, I've got to be more like that. I wish I was more like that, rather than just like being, not even basking in it, but just like being filled up by the light that they're projecting. I think like I still feel like, not like a seasoned queer. I don't know if anyone, I mean, I guess some people are seasoned queers, but I think that the way that you've been taught, super spicy, just marinating in the gay juices, the way that you're taught to think that women are attractive is so, like, you're so alienated from genuine attraction and what is valuable and who can, I think that when I first started thinking that I might be queer, I assumed that I would be attracted to women in the way that you're told to be attracted to women, so attracted to a very specific type of femme woman in a very specific way. And I think a lot of the way that I got into queerness, one of the first ways that I tried to access it was because I watched a lot of lesbian porn, which I think is purely because lesbian porn is less violent when it's free and at the point of access than heterosexual porn, and it sort of looks like they're having a better time, even though by the same token the lesbian porn that is right in your face is usually ridiculous and like super theatrical, very funny in a way. But I was just like, I don't want to watch all this violent pornography in which the women's pleasure doesn't look like it's prioritized. So I assume that all straight women watched loads of lesbian porn. All straight women had really romantic friendships. Like, everything was explainable, but the queerness of it was like the least likely option. One thing that I have realised in my relationships with women is that in queer relationships, and when you're like the same gender as someone, it is not written which role you should specifically take. And I had a relationship with a butch girl, and I somehow became so femme. I don't think I'm particularly femme in general, but I think that I really leaned into that side of myself. I really leaned into being a stereotype of femininity, to being like sort of like capricious and like hair flicking and like submissive. And because it was sort of constructed within our relationship in terms of our own personal dynamics for a while, it felt really fun, and it was really exciting to explore in a way that I was like, I'm claiming this, it's not been expected of me. Now, when I have relationships with women, I've tended to be the more dominant person, to be like, more in control. And I think that is interesting, because it's not something that I would necessarily associate with myself, being like a small nearly 5'3" woman. But I think it is nice to adopt that and have it not be gendered as male.
And you want me to with my elbow? Okay. The controversy around, was it Frankie Boyle's
It was
New
Frankie
World
Boyle's,
Order?
yeah, Frankie Boyle's New World Order.
So effectively a big experience of being trolled and the press picking it up and being really exploitative of everything that you said and taking it out of context. How did that impact you?
One thing that really sort of, I don't want to say violated, but I felt kind of horrible, is that I remember when the Daily Mail ran the story, they found a picture that was a promo picture from my show Venus, in which I'm like talking about the idea of being a goddess as a black woman. So I'm wearing a costume, I'm wearing like a dress, which is like not even a dress I would generally wear, because I was like, what's a goddess typey dress? So it's like a pink floaty dress. And in this promo picture, which I ended up not using, because I'm like, I'm like sort of on the floor in like a sexy pose. Or not even a sexy pose, but just sort of like relaxed, like, I'm a goddess, I'm Aphrodite, what. And in this article that was created purely to get people to like froth at the mouth, make them angry, they used that picture of me where like I'm wearing this sheer dress, like I'm sort of sexualized. They're trying to make me out to be this like, I think I said something like this, like black Marxist sex witch. Like they have to sexualize me in order to like more efficiently vilify me. And like Frankie gets to be in a suit in the article, and like whatever random nobodies are like pretending to be outraged by it get to be fully clothed. But they want to have this picture where it seems to be an invitation to like assess me as a sexual prospect. So that was kind of
and shows that they've really combed the fuck through your image.
Yeah, just combed through
your Google
like,
image
yeah,
to find that. Because I was going to say, when I was looking at articles online about you this morning, I found very little actually, like other than that shit, which I just kind of eschewed entirely.
Firm hand.
The image search, I was like, oh, Sophie looks hot in every single one of these images. There's not like a bad shot of you on stage with like your microphone like in your mouth. In terms of your experience in your body of that, I'm just interested in that that internet thing of knowing that there's a load of shit happening inside your phone or your computer, and then when you close that off, how you then, if you can, reconnect with your body offline, or if there is an experience during that period of numbness, disconnection, panic, I don't know.
I think that, I mean, at the moment I have therapy. I do therapy, take therapy. And
little doses.
little bite-sized chunks of therapy. And my therapist is very good at saying like, how does this feel, like root it in your body. And we talked about what was happening at the time it was happening. I think at the time when there was a lot of backlash for the Black Lives Matter Frankie episode, I was also doing quite a lot of work. That meant that I had to be on my computer. I was doing like a writing job, so I couldn't fully disconnect from it. And even if you're like, okay, I'll see something abusive and I won't reply to it, that's sort of like knowing it's there behind that door. Or like, I have to read like DMs, like seeing it come up. I don't deal with it straight away, but there is a sort of like a pit of bile that your body, like, your body knows is there, that it wants to access, that kind of brings a certain tension. And I like there's sort of tension, like closed offness. You can't be as happy and free about things. And I have sort of found my own ways of being like, I can't let that rule my life. But if I go to tweet something now or post something now, I'm like, people might just be like, you know, like in my DMs in a second be like, die you black whore or whatever. So I think that was difficult, because it's all very well to say that the online world is not real and you can just get out and do stuff, but so much of our world now is online, and so much of how we access tools to help us be in our body would be online. So that was difficult. At the time, though, I was like, I think my like physical relationships, I was in a relationship with someone who was like very caring, and I remember posting something on Bisexual Visibility Day and just being like, well, I'm visible, I don't care about these trolls, and just being like held and kept and cared for by that person helped me connect to what was important and real, rather than like swastikas in my DMs.
Yeah, good. I'm really glad that you had that, and also that you could root into that, because I think sometimes the most horrifying thing about the internet is that it does get inside you, and like you can be having a conversation, good eye contact with someone you love, and yet you can't actually hear the words they're saying because you're just thinking about like what you could potentially respond to a tweet you just read 2 hours ago.
Yeah, it's so bad. I think of it as like a sort of Aladdin's cave. Like it's just like, don't. What did you come on to do? Maybe you came on to make a funny tweet, maybe you came on to buy something, but it's just like, just don't touch it. Even if it's like a tempting conversation that looks like you could make a really good point or change someone's mind, it's like, don't touch anything. Get out there before it starts to blow.
It's not me, not we, must be the situation. Burn it all down to the ground, let's start again.
Oh, am I sexually confident? I think it's hard because I have been in quite like long-term monogamous relationship. No, that's wrong. That's a lie. I've been in quite long-term relationships. You can keep that correction in. I've been in quite long-term relationships. So I think with the people that I've been in long-term relationships with, I have had like a level of sexual confidence that I haven't before. But I think there's like ways that over like my 20s, my relationship to my body has changed, because the thing that I didn't tell you was that I have been assaulted.
Okay.
So I think that has changed my relationship to how I feel about my body, and like how giving I am with my body, or like whether I'm in control or not. I think in general, I think even when I'm naked and doing the sexing with someone, sort of assuming like a role of like a sexually confident person or a dominant person helps me feel protected.
Yeah.
So it's like sort of easier, but I think it's kind of less, it's more exposing and more scary to not be in control.
Playing a dominant role, taking control of a situation makes you feel like you're in control, makes you feel protected. Is that something that's developed out of those experiences, or is that something that you think would probably be your default anyway? I guess it's hard to separate them.
I guess it's hard to say. Like, this is something that I am asking myself. I think that like when I was younger, I feel like sexual stuff often took me by, like, I'd sort of transcend into an area of sexual activity, and it sort of wasn't like I was like, well, okay, I'll go along with this. So I remember the first time anyone ever went down on me was when I think, maybe not relatively young, but relatively young in my sexual experience. I was probably about 16 or 15. And it was this guy from like a boys' school who still watches my Instagram stories. And I was just so surprised that I was just like, I just wasn't expecting it at all. It just happened. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much nicer than fingering. Because like, it tends to be quite jab. I was like, this is incredible. And I was like, I'm not sure my friends know about this because there was just an awful lot of fingering going on.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is great. I love this. But I wasn't like, you go down on me.
Talking about that separation that can occur between like body and mind and almost leaving the building because you can feel like it's on fire. Does that connect with what you experienced after the sexual assault? And is that part of the therapy that you're doing?
So what I struggle with is I think if something that is sexually traumatic has happened to you, and this was actually the official reason, I don't know, I'm Sean Connery's here. This was actually the official reason that I wanted to do therapy, because I was like, am I damaged by what's happened to me? And so I'm reluctant to say if I disassociate or if I have anxiety or all this stuff, it is linked to the specific bad thing that has happened to me. But I think that it is pushing your natural or your instinctive responses down, or being unable to connect with them, is something that can keep you safe some of the time, and is definitely something that I think people who are socialised as women are sort of taught to do. Like, you sort of get groped by someone or like made to hug someone or feel uncomfortable, but you can't speak out about it because you don't have agency. You just sort of have to continue. And so I think on a low level, people are used to, like, if you get hungry and you don't eat, eventually those signals get mixed up to not connecting with their bodies. And I think that sometimes that can be useful as an efficient, if you just want to get something done, or you want to get through a traumatic time, or you have to care for people. I think that as a response to what happened to me, I have since actively disassociated or actively tried to disassociate or leaned into those feelings when they happen. But in terms of just general unwanted disassociation, I don't know if it's as a result of sexual trauma.
I guess in comedy as well, it's kind of in your toolkit. Like, disassociating is sort of an essential thing to do if you're going to go up in front of a really big audience, or even an audience that's like just full of your exes. There's a necessary detachment that needs to occur in order to be able to like deliver your material and believe that you're...
Yeah, you just have to... There've been times when, I'm sure you've had these times, it's just me, like, where you've been like so upset, you've been like sobbing and crying, but you have to go and do the gig, or you have to get on stage, or you feel terrible and mixed up, and I don't think those gigs are necessarily the bangers, but you achieve a certain sense of going through the motions or leaning into an emotion that I know I have some of the time, but I'm not necessarily feeling now. Maybe I'm feeling it by the end of the set. Maybe I'm on the way there. I just think there's an amazing amount of like violence, casual violence that people have to go through that is often sexual. I remember going to a green room. I remember being in a green room on a boat, and there was one act there that was being like really vulgar about black women, about like black pussy, and I was just like, I am in this room and this is horrible, and I don't have the authority to tell you to not do this, but it also just feels so callous because like I am, like, because I'm there, like it's just like respect that it's like I don't matter. I've also been at a gig and an act I'd gone on. It was like a really shitty gig. I stayed because I still would do this, but I thought I had to stay because there weren't very many people in the audience and I was quite new. And I went on and did my gig to like 5 people. And then the act, who was like a middle-aged white man, came on, and his whole set was basically just about like how he wanted to fuck me as I was like standing at the back of the room because of charity. And it was just really uncomfortable, really like lots of eye contact, very just horrible. The person who was talking about black pussy was just doing it in the green room as part of his chat. I was like, I am an earshot and you literally don't care. I don't matter this much because I've come off stage. Have I just become this black pussy? Am I still like a comedian to you? He didn't like say everyone else, they were all men, complimented me or like said well done on my set. He didn't say anything. I was like, what am I? And I really worry about younger like female comedians just like being prey to like just like men's egos and men's like lack of care in that way.
And maybe also because of the dynamics, feeling like they have to play along with it feeling like they have to not say anything or even be like negged, being pulled in by that kind of negative spiel. If you're already feeling inferior, allowing that to get deep inside you.
One thing that is nice about, I don't know if it's because I'm more famous or because I'm old, but one thing that is quite nice is that I don't feel like male comedians try and fuck me or like try and like, I feel like they treat me like I'm a colleague. And I think when I was newer, I feel like there was more disrespect. There was more like, what is this? There was more like, but I'm just like, no, I'm very much someone here who's working the same job as you. And I really like that.
She's coming home to me. She's coming home to me. She's coming home. Please don't leave.
Recently, I was in an open relationship, but it was not polyamorous because I did not view myself as polyamorous or view polyamory as a goal that I wanted to maintain.
Mm-hmm.
But without going too much into it, I had an open relationship and ended up simultaneously having meaningful relationships with two people. Meaningful as in being like, I loved both of them. They were both very important to me. And that was something that happened organically rather than me being like, the ideal is that I have, you know, two partners and like we share that. I didn't think about that, but I think organically that happened. And that was something that was sort of like complicated to manage and complicated to think about what I wanted because people are all specific. For me, people are specific, and with some people, it would only ever make sense to be monogamous because that person couldn't be anything else or the situation couldn't demand anything else. And so if you stumble into loving two people simultaneously, then it means you just sort of have to make decisions, and those might not tie up with your idea of yourself or what you want.
No, this is what I really want to know. And this could actually change my mind about having an open relationship.
Oh my God.
I mean, I think potentially my mind is already changing.
It's already changed.
Look, I think I've spoken to you about in the past as well, and I'm conscious that it's something that I should probably explore or let go of. I'm conscious that probably a lot of the way I feel, it comes out of a lot of infidelity in my childhood, not between me and other children,
Me and other children,
but like in my family, and that being really difficult and traumatic, and therefore affecting probably the way I feel about like really wanting and needing, and that being a valid thing, the security of like having someone that I know I'm in a relationship with, just us. I'm conscious that like that being born out of that isn't particularly healthy, but I think maybe that's probably true for quite a lot of people. I am really interested to know if the orgasms with other people are different. Like, because you have because normally obviously you have a comparison across like, oh, my orgasm with that person like 2 years ago or whatever, or 6 months ago or last week was different to the orgasm I'm having in this relationship now. But you might have literally not like in the same moment. But
okay, having sex with people in similar time frames, different people in similar time frames, and the sex with other people. I think my most recent long-term relationship was with a man, and it was open. And for the most part, outside of that, if I had sex, it would be with a woman. And I think that in terms of women, people who have been assigned female at birth and are socialized as women, relate to their bodies, there is a certain kind of empathy I have there as a cis woman. And so, and also in like the grammar of sex, the way we're taught to have it, when I first had sex for the first time with Mr. Right, I didn't realize that he hadn't come, or like like the whole narrative of what sex should be started and ended with his orgasm. Yeah. That didn't happen in my monogamous long-term heterosexual relationship, because I had like a very good partner and it wasn't like, this is all about me. But sure. I think that there is something about, I know you're talking about specifically about the rhythm, but like the rhythm of sex is different as it is with different people, but because different things are being achieved and different things are possible in terms of coming. I think that there is this thing that is talked about in ethical non-monogamy that is called NRE, or new relationship energy. And I have had some crushes or infatuations where I feel physically like I'm being filled up with this person. Like I can't get them out of my skin, out of my hair. Like I'm just like obsessed with this person. And I think that is something that is definitely a symptom of something new. And I think it can be great. It can be magical. The first time I felt it, unfortunately, was very toxic, but it was still exhilarating. Like I hadn't felt like that since I was a teenager. And that was very cool. And I think that will inform the kind of sex you have. I'm not going to say like one is better or worse. I think the like intimacy of having been with someone who knows your body and knows how to make you come is great. But also finding that out with a new person is also really great. One thing that I was wrong about in terms of open relationships or sex with other people is that I think in my head I was like, I can have sex like a man. Like, I love my partner. I just want to, like, you know, if I'm at a party and there's a hot person there, maybe I want to get off with them. And I think that the kind of person that I am, which does have to do with me being a cis woman, is I love a story. I love the story in porn. I love the flirtation. I love getting more of information about them. And I think that always makes you more emotionally connected. Mm-hmm. So sex with strangers, for me, is not actually that great in and of itself, and the sex is probably not going to be great. But sex with someone that you have chemistry with and that you're intrigued by is really nice, and is something that is hard, I think, to, and maybe not necessary to, recapture with a long-standing partner, because the way you relate to each other is so much more loving and knowing. And if you want that NRE or that little glimmer of like intrigue and not knowing, either you have to be like, that's part of my life before, or maybe have sex with someone new.
And what does an orgasm feel like?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
So I feel like I can have a range of orgasms. Like I think I can, maybe they're not even orgasms when they're shit, but I feel like I can have some orgasms that are shit.
I feel really bad for the shit orgasms that you're like, I'm not even going to give you the credit. Yeah.
I feel like, so I'll go from like the spectrum. So like when I think the best orgasms that I've had have always been with other people. I have read jealously like some books about wanking. Like I think maybe I read like Caitlin Moran, and I feel like a lot of women have a period where they like sort of discover wanking and they secretly wank, or maybe like it felt like this. I remember I was at school once and these girls were talking about they had vibrators and they were in the year below, and I was like, I'm such a prude. I was just so jealous. Like I remember like all my masturbating when I was like a teen or like a young teen was just like I'm very like I'd like knew that you were meant to look at your vagina. We'd had like PSHE, sex ed, and I'd sort of just like stick my fingers in it and just like feel like, but I just didn't know how to access it. I was just curious and just looking at it, but there was no like, I remember watching like Bible films and feeling like, ooh, like I needed to pee. Like I think I had arousal, but it wasn't like, I was like, I'm an educated young teen. I should understand how to, but I just didn't feel it or couldn't access it, couldn't connect the two. And so it was like kind of boring to like stick my fingers in my vagina. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that for a couple of years. The best orgasm kind of orgasm that I have is is that I feel like it probably takes a while of like coaxing. It takes a while of like getting everything to be involved in the orgasm. Sometimes maybe it's just like clitoral and it's just like, it feels like really like little tense, but like when it's just like the whole area and your whole body is involved. And I think, it's quite hard to think about.
Also, to draw attention to the fact that because this isn't a visual medium.
Oh yeah.
When you were talking about the clitoris being quite intense, you made sort of like little crab.
I made little crab things, like it's sort of like when it's just sort of opening and closing like really quickly, just sort of like clenching open and shut by itself, yeah. And it's sort of, but it's all sort of like in there. It's like it's like this tension of like a little like, and you're like, okay, yes. Like that's like a little clit orgasm. But when like you're really wet and like it's like the whole area feels engaged and there's something, I don't know what it is, so it's going to sound quite stupid, but like you can be coming and you've got feeling all these, my poor flatmates, can be coming and like you're feeling like these waves of like excitement and like arousal, and then in like the best orgasms I've had, there's a sort of like, I don't know, I feel like it's something like a fist closing, like a sort of like internal fist. Pounding is just like another level. Like, I think you're probably clenching even if there's nothing there to clench, which sometimes there might be.
And then the fist, how does that come in?
Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's like your clitoris is like a fist, like it feels really hard. Like, I feel like it's just suddenly like it feels like another contraction. It's well since I've come like this, but like, it just feels like being grabbed. Maybe it's like inside you, like just being grabbed internally. I remember one time it happened, and I don't think I generally come like this from penetrative sex.
Okay.
Because I don't know, like, I was having sex in a field, and I remember I had sex, and I felt this. I was having sex with my French ex, and we're having sex in a field, and
I like the way you put your hand up there, because you were like, we've got to this point where the description is not, we're not quite realising it. I need to give more information. Okay, hands up. I was in a field.
I was in a field, so, and it was, like, the sky was really blue, and like, when I came, I was like, oh, it's like you've taken like magic mushrooms, which I would never illegally take, and it's just sort of like glittery. I was like, this is just a great time. I think it's usually easier for me to come from like someone going down on me. We've heard about that seminal moment, because it's just sort of like, it feels more specific, and also like I get a lot of pleasure from clitoral stimulation.
I would be fascinated to know, as a study, I would be so fascinated to know if women in cis bodies have a way that they first came, or a way that they came quite regularly when they were younger, that then becomes kind of not a pattern, but like their most profound. Because it's almost like, I guess if you learn something, it's like any other skill. If you learn something young, then you build on it more than anything you'll learn later. So you have layers of experience on it. You just get better and better at that.
I think so, but I think sometimes I've really wanted, for me, like, sometimes I've really wanted to be, like, pounded. I'm punching my hand. Sometimes you really want to be pounded quite hard, but I feel, and actually I won't feel ashamed about doing this, I feel like sometimes my, like, orgasm gets lost in that sensation. I can't feel all the part, like, if something's in and, like, thrusting out of me, I'm also feeling, on some level, not discomfort, or just being into that motion rather than being in the motion of my body if you're being actively penetrated. So sometimes you're like, I want it so much, and you do come and you enjoy it, but like, you can't feel all of it because
100%.
you're still in a rhythm.
You feel a bit far away from it in a way, because there's so much other stuff going on. I think it's such a delicate balance between like being overwhelmed by a physical act of like pounding, and then your body, I think it's like a little dance. Your body needs a little bit of space, for me, where it actually has the space to almost go like, oh, I'm taking over now. You know, almost in a way that's kind of quite feminist.
Yeah.
Like, I want to have my own, can my voice be heard, please? I appreciate the effort, but also I've got a lot to bring to the table.
I have had multiple orgasms, but I felt like there's been like a coming up, cooling off point. So it's basically like you're just having sex again in a short amount of time. But I have had multiple orgasms where in like very quick succession, I feel like I've had repeated orgasms, and those two orgasms, when I've had multiple orgasms, have never been alike. Like, I've never had two crashing explosion orgasms. I've had like either a medium one and then a big one, or a big one and then a medium one. I've never had the insane orgasms in exactly the same sexual session.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have to be like, I've rested a bit and then we're just having sex again, rather than it's part of the thing.
Yeah, and also sometimes if you have one and then another and then maybe another, I often find like the one in the middle is the big one, because maybe the third one you go for because you're like, oh, there's absolutely third or fourth or fifth or whatever. Oh, there's definitely still like juice in the tank. Let's keep going. But something, like, obviously exhaustion sets in, but also maybe your body is like, oh no, you've had the best one. Don't keep trying.
You don't.
You can't match that. Yeah.
I feel like I'm very. I think my body is like gets lazy, and like I have like the orgasm's still good, but I'm just like I don't know. Maybe I think it is possible, but I think that one big one is usually all I can handle for a while.
So That was Sophie, such a legend. You can understand now why we were spoilt for choice when it came to the edit. Hence, all the juicy special treats on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Helen Duff to access those. Or if you just want to say so many thank yous for us making a full series of this banging podcast, go to kofi.com/Helen Duff to bung us some pounds. I would be deeply grateful for that, because I have loved making this series so much, and it would be really cool to see some monetary reflection of all the effort that has gone into the interviews, the editing, and everything else alongside. I am really excited about making the second series. We are doing interviews imminently with some amazing guests. I don't even want to get into who we've got on, but it is exciting that people have heard the podcast, thought it was brilliant, and now want to be featured on it. I'm very, very grateful for that. So let us know if there are in particular any experiences that you feel you would like to have more represented on the pod that you haven't heard about, that maybe you are experiencing and you would like some others to share around. That would be super cool. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. All the details are in the episode notes. This podcast is made with love by myself, Daisy Grant, and Lorna Rose Treen. I edited this one and it was a lot of fun. That's all I've got to say, other than the biggest of thank yous for sticking with us for the full series. I can see you in the numbers and you bring me so much joy. Also, all of the people who have left a review on iTunes, shared it with a friend, given it 5 stars, you are very special in my heart. Keep doing that. I love it. And the more people hear about it, the more people hear about it, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it never needs to stop, that stuff. Go on iTunes, give us a review, rate it 5 stars, and pass it on to somebody you think would deeply enjoy it. I will be back soon. Have a great rest of your week, day, evening, middle of the night, wherever you're listening, and take care of yourself.